Good evening. Welcome to the Board of Directors meeting. We are at Pownell Elementary School this evening, and I am the Vice Chair, Beth Munson, and Michelle Richardson, our Chair, is away for work this week. And we have a few people that are coming in a little bit late. Colin and Maddie should be here. Jill usually comes in, and oh, there she is. And I don't know if we'll have a student rep or not, but either way, we can get started with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do I have a motion for the consideration and approval of the minutes of the October 12th, 2022 meeting, barring any errors or omissions? Jen and Vali? And all those in favor? Everybody? Okay. Yeah, in favor, Candy? Yes. Okay, I thought so. All right, and do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
I have one this evening under the superintendent's report. Number 2, resignations. I have another resignation to announce.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to good news and recognition. And since we don't have a student rep here, we will just jump in with Holly Johnson, the principal of Pownell Elementary.
I'm going to test this. All right. So I am glad to be here, excited to be here, and I'm going to start off by just saying it has been a wonderful start of the school year, not only to the school, but for myself. The community has been very welcoming. Staff and students have really taken on this year with a lot of different changes. New staff is here as well. And it's been just a great start. A lot of new community building, and it's just exciting to be here. So thank you. I want to start by saying that the school year started actually in the summer by a new school initiative that was proposed by a student last spring. The cafeteria is now, we've gotten rid of plasticware and we're using silverware, and that was started on day one. I met with a student during the summer, and we made plans to move forward. Before the school year started, I brought her in so she could see all the new silverware, and very excited, took a few pictures. And that's just, I think she's planting little seeds so that I think the school will add some other initiatives as the year settles in, working towards other ways we can be more responsible as a school community. And the other students, everyone has been very responsive. It takes a lot more responsibility to make sure you don't dump everything into the garbage. And I know there were some people that were worried about that, but the students have been really good about that. There's a nice little poster that was handmade, and on the cart that we use, again, students made some posters just as reminders to be careful about that. So it's going great. Another good news is we had a student who approached some parents about adding another option for after-school activities. So we are able to offer co-ed flag football because of that school. The student really wanted to add that, and we had some parent support. So it's been an option for about 10 to 12 students, and it's been great. I'm going to show a little visual. I don't have fancy photographs, but this is a little note that was left on our playground by a kindergarten student. 2 students discovered that on our playground, I don't know if you know, there's a vehicle that is made out of wood, and it's got big old tires on it. Well, evidently, the front tire is broken, and they wanted it to be repaired. Here's a nice illustration. So I actually took a photograph of this and sent it as a text message to maintenance and described it a little bit more about what needed to be fixed on the playground. And the team at maintenance is always very responsive, and it was fixed within a couple days. So their little voice made a big difference, and it was exciting. So that's Just one more thing. Student participation is really, really strong in our band this year. The last year's 5th grade group was strong, but this year's 4th grade group has really joined on. When we had the instrument night, the art room was full, and we have 16 students in 4th and 5th grade participating, and having a lot of fun with learning that those first days and practicing daily. They come to school with their instruments, and it's great. And I can already hear great notes coming out of there. I'm jealous because I'm not a musician. We also added back a math question once a week. That was kind of dropped several years ago for multiple reasons, and some thought there wouldn't be enough participation, but this is on week 3, and every week there's 10 to 12 students, and it's not always the same 10 to 12, so more students are trying it out, and just having fun with it, and challenging themselves, and sometimes finding success. Every week there's several that are very successful in answering it, so it's great. Another good news to share is a week ago today, I had 6 parents that signed up to volunteer for a new program that I'm bringing to the school. And I call it Partner Readers. It's something I've done in previous schools. We met for about 2 hours last Wednesday, and the intent is for them to learn more about how we actually teach reading. We share a little bit about how we started as readers, and learned that things are slightly different now. And always trying to answer what their anticipated questions might be as they start to work with a reader, and build a lot more background knowledge about how we are teaching reading, and then ways that they can support. So the goal is for them to come in and volunteer in classrooms. Teachers that are interested are reaching out and setting up schedules. And it's not about teaching as much as supporting by just praising. So I've given them some scaffolding of things that they can be looking for, what it might look like and sound like, and they can reinforce that with some positive praise so that those students are just doing it again and again and again and feeling good about themselves as readers. And students all want to be reading, so the teacher can only read to so many one at a time, so this is great one-on-one time. And that's our good news to start the year.
Great, thank you very much. You're welcome. Okay, so we still don't have student rep, so we'll go on. Okay, so we are to number 7, which is public comment, and we have somebody here. So I just going to remind about a few rules here, that we have limited the comments to 3 minutes each, and identify yourself and what town you're from, and speakers should direct all comments to the board.
Is anyone else here to comment? For public comment, or just me?
I'm just going to read this anyway.
I just was curious.
Speakers should direct all comments to the board. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to school and education matters. It's not a public debate or conversation, so no questions should be directed to the board. We want to listen. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Tara McDonald, and I'm a concerned parent of RSU5. I'm also a community mental health provider serving children and families in the state of Maine for over 10 years. I was both concerned and surprised to learn that RSU5 would refuse me the right to opt my children out of ALICE drills. Since the board already knows my position, I'm really here hoping, I would be hopeful that parents would come, but if they're not here tonight, hopefully they're joining us virtually. So I'm really here to kind of give them information that they might not already have. So for those parents that don't know what ALICE is, it's an active shooter response training that our district adopted this year. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. My request for opting out was based on mental and emotional health concerns related to my understanding of the current research. Research from Georgia Tech suggests that active shooter drills are not only ineffective, but also shown to have a negative effect on the mental health of students, increasing anxiety, depression, and thoughts about death. I started by contacting my children's principal in August. When these efforts were not successful, I went to the superintendent, then included board members, and we'll meet Monday with the safety committee that has unilaterally made this policy of not allowing the option for parents to opt their children out of these drills. To be clear, this policy is not in any writing in any handbook that I can find. And a primary concern is the lack of transparent and honest communication from school to parents. For example, all of the writing on Alice is called safety drills, which are in fact active shooter drills. I recognize the effort to be mindful of language with children, but my 6 and 7-year-old are not the ones reading the handbook or notice. I am. It's purposely misleading to parents. If you choose such a controversial protocol such as Alice, and these types of drills are shown to have the potential negative effect on the mental health of students, the very least you can do as a district is to openly and honestly communicate with parents. To allow those parents who might already see their children struggling or concerned for a decline in their child's mental health the option to opt out. The National Association of School Psychologists says students should always be warned that a drill is going to occur and parents' consent should be obtained. Teachers and staff should be trained to recognize common trauma reactions, and students should have access to mental health supports after the drill. What I want our community to consider is, what plan do we have for kids who might be scared or traumatized by these drills? Do we actually have readily available resources to support these students? What behaviors, signs, symptoms are our administrators or teachers even trained in to notice if there's any adverse effects? When drills have ended, and maybe our students cognitively understand it was a drill, but the stress and anxiety remains in their body, what are we doing to process and support them? Or are we just thrusting them back into the academic expectations? And finally, if other local districts can partner with parents and train their teachers, why can't we? It's not a big ask. These are new protocols for our schools, protocols that I'm not sure research related to gun safety even supports, but regardless, parents deserve to make their own decisions on how to protect and support their children's mental health. It's not the job of a principal, it's not a board chair, it's not a resource officer, and it's certainly not a superintendent. It's a parent's decision. So I want to let any parents know that are watching that I'll be here next week, and I will report back to you about the results of the safety committee. Hopefully we are able to change some policy in this district, but I invite any parents who feel passionate about having the decision and the right to make these calls for their children to join me, and I'm going to share my email publicly, which is Tara, T-A-R-A, McDonald, M-C-D-O-N-A-L-D, MSW@gmail.com to contact me if you would like to join our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Doesn't look like we have any other commenters, so we will move on to number 8, reports from the superintendent.
Thank you. Under letter A, district happenings, we know that our fall parent-teacher conferences are well underway, and I certainly encourage any of our parents who haven't had an opportunity to schedule their students' parent-teacher conference to make sure you contact your school directly if you haven't already done so. Student performances, it's great that we have our kids back for some performances. Next week kicks off the school years with live events starting at right here at Pownell Elementary School. Our 2nd and 3rd graders are going to have a musical on November 3rd. And Freeport High School's musical will be November 10th through the 13th. And Durham Community Schools will have a play on November 17th and 18th, so I encourage everyone who can to get out to those wonderful student performances. Budget preparations for 2024. The administrative team met last week, to begin to discuss the process. I have worked with Peggy to revise some of the format that we've used for our team based on feedback from those administrators, and the last couple of days she's been getting out those spreadsheets for our principals. And we do have 2 work sessions scheduled for the full administrative team in November. We're going to be partnering with the Department of Education to receive training to support the development of a multidisciplinary teams to build, strengthen, and maintain knowledge and skills in behavioral threat assessment and suicide prevention. The behavioral threat assessment management is nationally recognized as a best practice in school safety, focused on early intervention, violence prevention, and student support. And we believe that this will just give us another tool in our toolbox to support students. The MSSA annual meeting was today, and we heard from Dan Rose and Michael Busher, a session from him, as well as Melissa Condon, who's a school emergency coordinator at the state of Maine. And also the main presentation today was David Horsinger. He's the CEO of the Trust Edge Leadership Institute. He talked about driving performance in school culture with trust, and he is the keynote speaker for folks who are going to the MSMA conference tomorrow, and I think you'll really enjoy him. He was fantastic and very inspiring. And lastly, I have under happenings, the Director of Facilities and Transportation position. Our screening interview team met on Monday. We completed our confidentiality training, reviewed questions and criteria for the positions and screened applications, and the initial interviews for that position will begin Tuesday, November 1st. Our hope is that we have someone in place for a little bit of overlap before Dennis leaves. And letter B, resignations. I have one more to announce this evening. We received a resignation from Tracy Boyer. She is a bus driver. We wish her well. And that is the end of the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Jean. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, Mara?
Thank you, Jean. Excited for those musicals. And I'm excited to hear that we're partnering with DOE on that threat assessment work. That sounds really, really important. I just wanted to ask, in follow-up to our most recent email update, you mentioned that some other districts, that you gotten information about some other districts around opt-outs, and I just was wondering if you could elaborate or share more information with the board on that. Thank you.
Sure. Just certainly that was one thing that was a question that was raised by some folks. So I have spoken to several superintendents that are in our region, and they have shared there is not an opt-out in their district for safety drills. But they do provide accommodations as we would.
Do you remember what districts those were offhand, and could you just elaborate on the accommodations? Thanks.
In terms of folks I spoke to even today, for example, superintendents in Brunswick, SAD 75, which is Harpswell, Topsom, Bowdoin, they're a large area, MSAD 51, which is the Cumberland area, Wyndham, just to name a few that I've talked to. But accommodations, we provide accommodations now for safety, such as a fire drill, for example, because we know there are some kids who are very sensitive to sound. So for those kids, it may be, for example, they have headphones. It may be we take them out early, we prep them. So whatever it is, based on what we know about that child, or if there's parent input feedback on that we support kiddos through the drill.
Thank you so much. And could I just ask one last question? So is that typically part of an IEP, or is that a formal agreement, informal agreement?
It doesn't have to be. Sometimes there's students with IEPs, but it doesn't have to. It's just based on a parent could say, I know this about my kiddo, and we would certainly work with the family to provide those accommodations. And we do already for other drills.
Patty?
Thanks, Jean. There was so much packed in your update that I felt like there's so much. So could you just speak a little bit more about the behavioral threat assessment piece?
Yes, and I actually asked Dr. Seller to come this evening because she was really instrumental in finding out this information and bring it to RSU5. So if Dr. Sellers, if you would mind coming to the podium, you can tell us all a little bit more about that.
All right, so we have this opportunity, grant-funded opportunity in partnership with the DOE to participate, as the superintendent said, in behavior threat assessment training. So what we've done is identified individuals at each school. So principals were able to nominate 3 people to participate to be a school-based team, and then we also have a district-level team that will respond and support and also guide and the school-based team should there be a concern. So we're looking at students who might, may have either posted maybe a threat on social media of harm to self or others. This allows the team to respond to determine if the threat is really credible, if the threat was maybe just something was done, out of emotion for the moment. But, the point is to make sure, was it a credible threat? What are the needs of this student? What are the social emotional needs of the student in terms of their voicing this threat in some way and being able to respond and provide support. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for that. Actually, I've done the 6-hour threat assessment training, and having gone through that last year, the one thing that that I have a question about is that you're looking at incidents in your school and identifying what level they are, and is it really like a social emotional piece where it would be, better for the child to have an intervention, as opposed to our discipline policy is very structured, and sometimes these threats fall under that. And so when we're looking at doing this training as a district, is there also talk of looking at our discipline policies to see if they need to be amended to reflect this training?
I don't know if there's been any specific talk, but I think that might be a natural outcome of this training, where we kind of recognize some changes that might need to be made in the discipline policy. But like you said, it's all about identifying interventions that the student may need, in order to mitigate any future threat or mitigate any things internal that are going on with that student.
I guess for me, like being in this role as a board member, I just think that those things really have to go hand in hand, because I felt like when I went through this training, there are times when an incident may have happened, and going through the training, I would respond in a different way. But if our discipline policy said that this is what had to be done, I just feel like it has to kind of go hand in hand, or at least closely linked, because I think the training is very valuable. But as a district, I want to make sure that we can respond, because if we have a policy in place, I would think we have to follow that policy. So I'd like to, really speed that up. That's something as a board, when we talk about what we want to look at it for policies, that should be more, or am I wrong here?
I can put that down as something, for the board to talk about. I definitely took a note on that, so we can. Maddie?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective as a policy committee member is that I would agree. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating when we're reviewing policy than when we say, well, is this what we actually do in practice? And then we take a lot more time bringing in principals and teachers, nurses, et cetera, to find out what actually happens versus what we have in policy. And we work really hard to bring that together. So I'm hoping that Cynthia is going to be at the district level involved in this training, because she's our policy person. That would be my hope. I'm going to volunteer her for that if that's allowed.
Polly?
Thank you, Ms. Sellers. I have a question, and I'm trying to make the connection with an update that the superintendent sent maybe 3 weeks ago, where there was some reference made to a tool that seems to be linked to this training, which in essence would be picking up emails that seemed to have content or keywords that were red flags. And I just want to make sure that this is a different topic or a same topic. I'm not sure how they fall into this conversation.
This is a different tool.
It is a different tool.
That we're looking and exploring than what Dr. Sellers is talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No, we're good. Okay. All right, then we will move on. Actually, maybe if Piper, did you have something planned? Okay, now that Piper's here, we'll circle back and get the good news from the student representative.
Sorry, I just had to get it up. So tonight the boys soccer team is playing Yarmouth at Yarmouth for their quarterfinals game, and I believe, as I was last reported, the score was 5-1 Yarmouth. But Saturday we have cross-country states at Twin Brooks in Cumberland. The boys are racing at 12 and the girls are racing at 1. We also have at 3:15 in Cape versus Freeport field hockey. And our homecoming will also take place this Saturday at 7:30 to 10, so it's going to be a busy day for everyone. November 11th through the 13th, the drama department at Freeport High School will be putting on Shrek the Musical Junior, and this Halloween, October 31st, we will be doing a Mentee and Mentors Halloween Costume Day. On November 16th, we will be having a Makers Fair, which is where students at our school can sell things that they have made for an actual profit. And on November 15th, we'll have our ski swap and sale put on by the Ski Boosters. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Piper. Okay, so we'll jump back to where we were with the administrator reports, and we'll ask Peggy to come up.
Good evening, everyone. Well, believe it or not, the first fiscal quarter is all done. So we've already gotten to that point in the year, and we are in very good financial standing at this point. Everything's in line to where it should be for this time of the year. The Finance Committee met on October 12th, and Beth will be reporting out on that later this evening. And one little update to the minutes of that, where I had mentioned that the Q4 report that there were some software issues that I was working through, and got it done, got it figured out with our software support team, submitted to the state, and it has now been approved. So a little update to that. I'm conquering these software issues as they come along.
That's great, Peggy. Thank you.
And that's all I have this evening.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So, and then we'll have Holly Johnson come up for the Pownell Elementary School Goal Review.
So a lot of our work for the goals of this year, of course, are based on last year's and reflecting on the work that was planned and work that was completed, and then impact on student learning and different areas of the school. So this year's goals kind of focus on, well, I started by really community building. The bulletin board that you may have walked by, if you came in the front door, I chose to focus on some key words that when they're put together figuratively and literally, they mean learn. So the board says reflect, solve, create, grow, and think. And as a school, we're really working on supporting children and that teachers have really shared that of course, some of it's based on COVID, but really supporting students as a community together and individually so that each student has more agency. Teachers are thinking that our students need to be more engaged and more active participants in their learning. So as I share some of the goals, a lot of it gets kind of mixed together. We're not necessarily separating social emotional learning from the academics because it's so closely tied. So as I go through, you'll see things that are kind of woven together on that. Goal 1 centers on social emotional learning and action steps that we are taking. The first one starts with responsive classroom. This is an initiative that the school and district has been a part of for a while, and we are just continuing to deepen our learning. We have new staff, so bringing them on board as well. I spent some of the first days of our school year together with staff, really making sure that we all had a clear understanding of our school-wide expectations. I invested in some posters that you'll see around the school. The blue and yellow one in the back is for the lunchroom. There are common areas in the hallways, the playground, and restrooms that are in a similar format to really make it visible for students, but also for staff, so that we can be mindful of what language we're using with students. And if we need to use it as a teachable moment with individual or a group of students, it's right there, making it very visible and clear. And then teaching into these expectations, not just once, but throughout the year, and really supporting students along the way, redirecting, reteaching as needed. And it's setting a really good tone in the school that's really supportive of learning. Another aspect to this work is our year-long study that I'm using some of our Wednesday professional learning together, and that's around student engagement. And we started by assessing, each of our classroom teachers kind of assessed how would they when they look at their classroom and students on the whole, how are they in 4 different areas? And then we had discussions about where they are in the continuum that the rubric sets out. And from that, we are setting some goals and different professional learning that really focus on flexible grouping, collaboration, student discourse, and goal setting. So those are all things that are strategies that we're going to be learning more, and teachers are already starting to implement aspects of those as well already. Some examples of that, in kindergarten, students are starting to be readers and writers. First graders are that much more ahead of them a little bit, right? So our first graders paired with our kindergartners so that our kindergartners could read and share their writing, and first graders gave them feedback on their writing. Lots of good memories because the first graders got to go back to their kindergarten room to do that, and a lot of reflecting on what, a year ago, what they were like as learners. And then vice versa, the same thing happened. Our kindergartners went to our preschool room to do the same exact thing. So it's a wonderful opportunity to have them collaborating together and talking about learning and kind of coaching each other as learners. Another example of that is in math. Teachers are using more partnership work in one aspect of the learning. Today I was in a 5th grade classroom, and after doing some of the teaching and learning together, and as students got set up to start doing some of it independently, they were set up with a partner so that they could coach each other in different aspects. And not that they were answering the questions together, but if someone had a little question about how did you round a number, which did you use, tens or hundreds? So they had some great conversations as mathematicians, and not just what did you do, but why. And I leaned in to kind of listen to coach them, or listen in afterwards to really develop that thinking, and praise them for the work that they did together to support each other. So it's great. And we're going to want to continue to do more of that. Another aspect of the first goal is the leadership team is currently in a book study, and the title of the book is called How Learning Works. And we're reading it as a group and then picking out chapters to start sharing with staff in some professional learning later in the year. We will not make it through the entirety of the book this year, so I expect it to be like a 2-year process on that. The second goal picks up from last year in academic achievement and growth in both reading and math. There was definitely lots of growth in achievement last year, and we want to keep supporting growth for all students. So our focus is not only on achievement, but really strengthening growth of all students. When I looked at the data, definitely some of the early years, 1st and 2nd grade, I wanted to really support them in growing stronger early on so that they can continue to grow. So some of the action steps focus on the younger grades, and then even up at the other end in some different ways. I started this year by revamping and updating our RTI process here at the school. There was a system in place, but there was some lack of clarity on the process and some overlap, so it wasn't necessarily working as efficiently. So I spent some time redoing all the protocols, straightening out the language of it, and then we did some professional learning as a school to get it started, and it is up and going and running. Teachers like the ease of how I've organized the documents they can access, and a lot more transparency on who's being serviced, what are they receiving for different supports. So a lot more transparency on who's there, what we're doing to support, and then looking at their progress more consistently. We are in a really strong cycle of at least every 6 weeks, really looking at students' growth and talking about and making changes in their supports if needed. Another aspect is for the early learners, really supporting phonics growth and the transfer of that work to their skills. And teachers are looking at different ways to do that beyond. We have our phonics program and they're doing that, but then looking at how to support them in that transfer, which is key for learners. And for grades 3, 4, and 5, we're focusing more on comprehension and higher order thinking for the readers, and getting students more involved in that by setting some goals and working towards that. We are also implementing that new partner reading program, so I expect that to really support readers in reading more frequently, which is really important, practicing those skills and growing their love of reading. The other thing teachers are really wanting to support is stamina. Our readers don't have that stamina for reading at longer periods of time, longer passages, more text. And we certainly see that as we are taking our state testing, that it really impacts their stamina for that. So we'll be introducing, I call it a reading challenge. It's really, there's nothing involved. They're not going to win or get anything. It's going to be very just, what can you read, how many minutes, and I will tally it up by grade level and make it competitive that way, but there'll be no pizza party or anything. That is really just for fun of reading and really seeing our change of how much we're reading over time. So I'll keep track of that month after. Well, it will be during the different school breaks. We even started the school year by doing that. There was a chart in the hallway that each week teachers averaged how many minutes a class was reading independently, and over the change of time, that the time doubled from the first week to the fourth week. So it was great, and the students could see that growth as well. I plan to do that in February to track and see, what was it like at the end of September? Now what's it like in February? So another way that I am working to support reading is Cynthia Alexander was able to find some funds for the school to purchase some more books for teachers to use. Teachers were wanting to meet more often and for our small group instruction, which is key in reading. And they were noticing we don't have enough books to do that. So one phone call, and money was provided, which was great. Some of the books have already started to arrive, and teachers are thrilled to start using them. And it's just really a good opportunity to have rich resources that and enough of them that students can use. Well, teachers are using them first for instruction, and then it becomes available for students to read independently. So we'll be looking to add to that collection over in the future as well, both leveled readers and some phonics books. The next area for academic achievement and growth is in math. Our RTI support is focusing on math fact fluency. And I think we are, even as a school, going to start looking at what are we doing to support that growth from first grade on, and what can we do more or differently to make sure we're supporting students in those math facts. And our RTI teacher and special education teacher are working with the district consultant in that area of math fact fluency, and so far those meetings have been very supportive and helpful. Another thing we're doing is really encouraging that engagement, and our weekly math question is one of those ways we're trying to get students more excited about math and interested in math in different ways. And our math team has actually started as well, and that's going very strong, and some great participation in that. And we're really focusing on collaborative grouping, student discourse, and self-assessment in the classrooms. And that's certainly in math, but you'll see that across the day in other learning areas. The third goal is focusing on increasing our awareness and practice of equitable and inclusive practices. This was definitely a school goal last year. Some steps were taken, and some of the work that was started, and that would be the equity walkthrough tool that was chosen last year. It wasn't chosen until later in the year, so now this year we're going to be able to put that into action and use it to do a pre and post assessment of our practices. I'm working on bringing the Cromwell Center. They are in Portland, and they are a center that is, they've been around for, I think, 30 years. I believe a long time ago when they were first starting, I was a teacher, and my students participated in some of their work, and I still have great memories of that. They offer resources that teachers can use, or they're reopening their work with schools that they're actually coming to schools and delivering some great resources and programs for students. It's based, and the curriculum is called Respecting Abilities. And I've already signed up to get on their list, so I'm waiting to see when we can have that opportunity. It'll be great. Our civil rights team has started off great this year, a little earlier than last year, so they're really excited that they're organized and ready to lead the school on November 4th for our day of welcome. And the team is really excited about that. We're planning to just kick the day off here in the gym with a early meeting so that they can talk to students about that and share some resources that students can use. And we're looking forward to it. It'll be a great opportunity. That's what I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Holly. Okay, Kara, sorry.
Hi, Holly. Thank you so much for that. I noticed you had something in here about a principal's advisory and a student advisory.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell us more about those.
Yeah. So, and I may have used the wrong, it used to be principal's advisory, and I've changed it to student advisory, and it is up and going. It was done through election. Students had to apply, so I had an application that students had to use to apply. And then there was about 18 students that applied, and then I made up a ballot with all of the interested students by grade level, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th voted, and they chose 2 candidates for each of the grade levels. So there are 6 students. We meet on Tuesdays. We were doing recesses, but we decided to move to lunch. So we're meeting on Tuesdays at lunchtime. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? Maddie?
Thank you. The Respecting Abilities program sounds interesting. Is that I'd love to know just a little bit more about that, and also if that's something that you'll be sharing with your counterparts across the district.
Oh, yeah. So it's really ironic. I have wanted to have in my previous school, I have that work there, but they stopped doing school visits probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I had no idea. So I was disappointed. Their information was still available, but they wouldn't come and work with students around it. But just by chance, I got a postcard from them, and it was introducing that they are back active working in schools. And it really, it's done in different grade levels or grade spans, so the messaging is appropriate developmentally for the students. It's just it's a way of looking at differences and understanding that we're all different, and that's okay. And it's a really around disability, so it's just another way to be more inclusive and understanding of others.
And do you know if there's a plan for the other principals to look at this
I
as
have
well?
not brought it up. I have not brought it up, so.
I love it when we have pioneering programs in different schools,
Yep.
but if it ends up being something great, then it would be great if, these kids all end up in high school together if they'd had similar opportunities.
Yep, I will do that, thank you. I know the partner reading program, I've mentioned it to the principals, and they definitely want to see what I did, and I told them I'm willing to share. In fact, I invited them to come join in the training the other day, but everyone's busy, so that didn't happen. Yep.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Holly. Okay, we are on to number 10 on our agenda, board comments and committee reports. And so first we have board information exchange and agenda requests. Polly.
Thank you. I do have quite a few today, but I'm going to try to keep it brief. So the first one was a follow-up to my prior question, and Dr. Sellers left, unfortunately. But I just wanted to voice my opinion that when the board looks at that tool that will be tracking communication, that we remind ourselves that privacy is a concern to staff and students. So I want to be super careful about how that tool gets implemented and give staff and students and parents plenty of opportunity to comment before anything is implemented, especially if there's an expectation of privacy that will not sync up with the reality of using this new tool. Different topics, the school capacity. I wrote an email, just wanted to follow up on that. Freeport, as most people know, is trying to revitalize the downtown by turning it into a more residential mecca than a retail mecca. So a lot of building permits are being issued. At the moment, there's 144 units that are in complex that are half full. And thank you, our superintendent has a number of children who are enrolled in the schools from half of that complex, which is currently occupied, and that's 10 students. The other half will be occupied fairly soon. Down on Depot Street, there is already an approved complex for 70 additional units. And there's also a pending application for a complex on Main Street in Freeport for 30 apartment buildings, meaning 30 units within a complex of apartment buildings. And this is just the beginning. It's going to accelerate. We're going to start seeing a lot of new students. So I think the board really should pay attention, keep an eye on all the permits that are being issued. If the superintendent can be in close touch with the manager of the town of Freeport, just to see what's coming in the pipeline and be aware that any changes to the capacity of our schools take a long time. So just the farther ahead you look, the better it will be and the fewer portables we will have in all of our schools, which are not the most preferred by most of our residents. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and this is something that was brought up to me by many residents who have been mourning the loss of the Challenge Day program. Maddie has been a staunch advocate for it. We lost the program, I think, about 4 years ago, Maddie? Yeah. And at the time, we were hoping that soon enough we would have another program to replace it. Jen Galco, the high school principal, said that she was working towards something in conjunction with other school districts that would basically create a similar kind of environment where students could connect emotionally. That hasn't happened yet. And there's a very, very profound need for the students to be able to connect emotionally and support each other and learn about the struggles that each one is going through. At the time when we had Challenge Day, several of us were there on the floor helping facilitate. It's an amazing program. So to the extent that the board can reconsider the decision to not continue with Challenge Day, and if cost is an issue, rely on the community for fundraising, I think our students will be very well served. The people who contacted me are very committed to supporting the emotional needs of the students, and they are committed to fundraising to make it happen. So even though it's a sizable chunk of money, because now there need to be 2 groups instead of 1 because of the size of our grades, it's still something that I haven't seen replicated by any other program, and the effect that it has on students and staff is unbelievable. So something to keep in mind. And lastly, there are a couple of things that I would like to request that be added to the sustainability meeting that's happening next week. One is the status of the composting programs. It was come to my attention that the high school has rescinded the composting program. I'm not sure if that is decision that was done for the permanent future or whether that is something that was done temporarily to train the students to do a better job composting. But we've been working really hard to train the students to do the right thing, and I don't think we want to give up only because some students are not following the protocol. So if we could discuss that at our sustainability meeting, that would be great. And the other thing to include at that meeting, if possible, would be a conversation about the conversion to propane for appliances. As we all know, methane is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, and anything that uses propane basically has a much worse carbon footprint that we would like it to be. So to the extent that we could take some time to discuss that and look at alternatives, that would be great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Susanna.
All right. Thank you. I've just got a couple things, but not quite as many, so I'll try to keep it quick. Just picking up on two that Volley was saying, just really emphasizing the privacy aspect on communications, because while we want to know what people are, I mean, you can say you want to know what people are saying, but you also want people to feel comfortable in saying what they need to say. And yeah. And just on the sustainability, I know there are a couple more grants that are out for some school things, so I'd love to have that on the agenda, because I know for, you know, there were a lot of people in the community excited that we'd applied for a grant for something like an electric school bus, for example. We didn't get that grant because we were considered a school that could buy it ourselves. But there is a lot of money out there and for things, so just like to have that as part of the discussion. And then also, I'd love to have a follow-up, and whether this is in your superintendent report or however the appropriate mechanism is, but love some more information on the safety drills, because I'm a bit bothered that the information I'm hearing from parents reading in LTEs in the newspaper is not the information that I've received from the school. And I think just understanding what's actually going on and where these communication breakdowns are happening would be really helpful for me. So I know that there's the meeting next week with the safety committee, and maybe something out of that can help understand maybe what's actually happening, what parents are getting, how things are being interpreted. Any kind of information would be really helpful to have, because I'm just bothered that the info we have, especially because some of the concerns we've heard from parents, both with Tara tonight, but in emails, et cetera, are things that the school had addressed in speaking with us. And so hearing if these are either not actually implemented as such, or parents are getting, kids getting other information, I'd really like to have a more complete rundown of what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone? Mara?
Well, I don't want to put Colin on the spot, but we did have the delegate assembly. Should we share, Colin?
No more. I don't think we should, because it was too much fun. And those 4.5 hours just are going to stay private inside of me as joy that is not replicable in any other fashion. Yes, indeed, we had a great 4.5 hour conversation about various different proposals. A number of proposals moved forward that we, I think, will be that we were hoping would move forward. Unfortunately, I think the big takeaway was we had a very robust discussion about the question of public comment, and the two amendments that we wanted to make were made and then were passed. But we did not, you'll be able to correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Mara, but there was not enough, we needed 2/3 of the group to be able to pass that resolution, and we did not, I think it was 61% when we needed 66%. So that was quite disappointing because it was a very good discussion. A number of other districts who have had a lot of challenges around maintaining healthy public comment spoke quite clearly and adamantly about their need for support. So I would be curious how we could have a conversation going forward, how our board could independently continue to advocate for the state to provide more guidance and rigor for school board public comment periods across the state. And also it was really fun.
And I think the rest of the resolutions passed, right, Colin? Just that was the only one that failed?
That's my recollection.
Yeah, so that just means that the MSBA won't be advocating for that this legislative session.
Thank you, Maura and Colin. Maddie.
I do think there's a session at the conference on public comment period, so if either of you are going, that hopefully that might be an avenue to take that forward or just learn more about how to do it. Wow, this is very loud. I wanted to recognize that this is Valley's last board meeting after 2+ terms, and she's been an incredible colleague and a mentor to me for sure. And I know she won't be far. She's super engaged in the community, but I'm really grateful for just the level of thoughtfulness that she brings and the way that she engages us in respectful yet somehow usually challenging dialogue. Like, it's really a good model for how to engage in difficult discourse. So thank you, Valley. And I wanted to echo what she said about Challenge Day, which not a lot of people are left who've been with me since I've been here, but I have been pretty vocal about Challenge Day. You know, we were really lucky to get that in the high school initially through some private funding, and then it got onto our budget, and we only did it for 4 years. At the point that every freshman class had gone through that program, we then stopped, and it's because they're limited to how many kids they can serve, and it would have been double the time and double the cost for us to continue it. And I also know that some of the administration's concerns were that we didn't always do the best job following through with everything that happens in that one-day session. But nonetheless, the empathy building and the community building and character building, culture building aspects of that program are profound and needed now more than ever. And you know, we have been seeing the mental health struggles that our kids going through have been escalating since pre-COVID times, and we've certainly seen in our district that it's gotten a lot tougher. And so people have, I'm not the only one who's been thinking about it. I've also had community members come up to me. I do know there is an appetite for fundraising for this, so please let's not let cost be the issue. I do want to acknowledge that I know we have a wonderful grant from LL Bean it's a lovely day for all of our high school students to participate in, but to my mind, that in no way replaces the kind of empathy building and tough conversations that happen within the Challenge Day program. You know, if you're a kid who does not feel included in your high school, the day at Discovery Park doesn't necessarily help make you feel included. I know that from personal experience and from hearing from others. The last thing I'll say is that the opportunity for community members to participate in that program as mentors is also huge. And I personally, and I know others, have had kids reach out to me years later because they knew that I was an advocate for them when they may have felt that they lacked other supportive adults in their lives. And so I will send a follow-up email to the board with the link for the organization, and if anybody wants to know more about the program, I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one. And I hope that this is something that Jean, that you and the admin team will consider bringing back.
Thank you, Maddie. Piper.
I think I was the first grade that didn't have Challenge Day at the high school, but I know that I had a good bunch of friends in the class that graduated last year, and like one time we were just talking and we were talking about Challenge Day, and they talked about the impact it had on them as a student, and the people that were in their group for that they like still had a connection with, and when they thought about them they had a more complex understanding of them as a person. So I think it does help make bonds and enrich our community, and I know it was thought of as a positive experience for all of those students, so it would be nice to have that back in the high school. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Piper. Anybody else? Okay. We will move on to, me, Finance Committee. All right, so as Peggy mentioned, we had a meeting, and I mean, it's all written out here for you, and she gave you a great update. So yeah, basically, although the one thing that we're still looking into, I guess, is the increase of the insurance, the property and casualty insurance was over what we had expected already as a significant increase, so we're checking back into that to make sure everything has been credited properly. And the Finance Committee, we're also going to be able to, at some point, meet with Cynthia and June to learn a bit more about the grants that they administer, and so we can have a more understanding of how that works. And obviously, we're still just trying to put something together to explain the cost-sharing way. So we're still working on that. So I'll take any questions, if anybody. No? Okay, good. So we are down to strategic communications.
Yes.
Candy? Okay.
And that's your little lavender color, purple thing, and it's all pretty much written out here too. We, you see our meeting dates, and I'm chair. We reviewed 2 documents, the budget brochure and the staff satisfaction survey. And the budget brochure, we went through and talked about some suggestions, as you can see bulleted here, that want to improve the photo on the front cover a little bit and replace the quote that's there with the motto, the school system's motto, and to do away with all the acronyms, because a lot of people reading them wouldn't even know what they meant. You can see include a thank you to the voters. In the points of pride, there's something from each school and about athletics. And the suggestion was also to have something in there about other co-curricular, particularly the arts program. And, excuse me, and our board of directors can be less than a page. We can do something about that. And we talked about in the school update section, trying to make them a little bit more similar in size, and possibly with some bullets. And Will Pidden isn't here, but in addition to talking a lot, his writing was a little bit more than some of the other ones. So we're going to get some more feedback about the budget brochure. And looking at the staff satisfaction survey, excuse me, the main thing was that we wanted to make sure that more than just the teachers and ed techs had input into that survey. So we'll be looking to get some feedback about that and reaching to a larger audience. The other thing is, Valley wasn't there, and I think there might be somebody who chose, after the choices for committees. We're scheduling, as you can see up in the meeting dates, we're scheduling an extra meeting in November to talk about the timelines and further information on these 2 items.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Candy? Okay. All right, so next is policy. Is that Maddie? Okay.
That's me. Okay, so we've already brought the memorials policy to you at our last board meeting, so that was reviewed at our last meeting. But the other 2 policies that we're bringing, actually, I guess we're bringing more than 2 back today. The first one, JLCD, it's mostly updated to reflect new law. And we did the typical updates to parents and guardian, using the language around guardians, using inclusive pronouns. But also, this is a big change is the inclusion in the medications definition section of naloxone, which is more commonly referred to as Narcan. So that's now in there as well. And then in the GCFB, recruiting and hiring administrative staff policy, it's pretty basic in the first paragraph. It's about updating the language around protected classes. Just that gets updated every now and then in law, and so we have to make sure that that stays up to date. And then in the second paragraph, if you were first reading this, you might think, boy, that seems oddly specific, but there is new federal law, commonly known as the Crown Act, which prevents discrimination around hair. And so that's why that language has changed there. And then we just added something in the last paragraph that that lets people know that we do, as a district, provide equity training beyond what's required by law. And then GCFBR, the recruiting and hiring administrative staff process, there are no changes recommended. We typically move these procedures into a different bucket, but we decided to keep it in the policy bucket because it pertains to hiring, so we thought that was important to keep it in policy. And if I've forgotten anything, I'm sure Cynthia will. Oh, good.
Great, thank you, Maddie. Any questions for Maddie? No? Okay. All right, so we will move on to 11, policy review. I'll invite Cynthia. No? Everything you were going to say? Okay, I had one thing that I noticed, and it's on the policy. Maybe, I don't know. On the first one, page 2, with the definitions, you have parent defined, and then guardian is defined under parent. And so then it seems redundant to me that you would have to add parent and guardian, or you would, if you want to keep the parent-guardian thing, you would just take out that definition of parent. I don't know, that's my thought, anyway. Anybody have any other thoughts or? Okay, I guess I'll take a motion for consideration and approval of the first read of the following policies: JLCD, Administration of Medication to Students; GCFB, Recruiting and Hiring of Administrative Staff. Jen and Kara, all those in favor? Great, thank you. That's everybody.
Beth, may I make one comment?
Yes.
Related to the conversation earlier about the policy. I think, Jill, you were mentioning the discipline policy to go along with the tool. And we just revised JK, student discipline, in June. And if you review that, it's very much about the restorative justice, or really, it gives a lot of leeway in that. So I'm not sure if you could take some time and then maybe give me comment, because I feel like that really does address maybe what you're getting at with what you had said. So I just wanted to make that comment. You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Cynthia. Okay, so we have no unfinished business, no new business, no personnel, and we're back to our second public comment. No. All right, and then I would take a motion to adjourn. Susanna, Mara, all those in favor? All right, thank you very much.